Myra Dane had survived 14 months on Kethera 7, a feat that would have earned her a promotion back on the colony ship if anyone from the Terran Expeditionary Fleet still remembered she existed. The distress beacon had long since burned out, and her emergency rations had been reduced to 3 protein bars and a canister of something that might have been coffee in a previous geological era, but Myra had learned to adapt. The forest provided if one knew where to look and what not to touch. The glowing mushrooms were edible. The purple berries caused temporary paralysis. The root vegetables that grew near the crystalline streams were bland but nutritious. She had carved out existence in the ruins of her crashed survey pod, fashioning tools from salvaged metal and building a small fire pit from stones. What she hadn't expected was the company Tarnik appeared on the 47th day, a creature that defied every xenobiological classification Myra had studied at the academy. He was approximately the size of a large dog, covered in midnight blue fur that seemed to absorb light, with 6 legs that moved in an unsettling but graceful rhythm. His eyes were amber, slit-pupilled, and far too intelligent. His mouth, when he opened it, revealed rows of crystalline teeth designed for tearing flesh. He was, by every measurable standard, an apex predator. He was also, apparently, a child. Myra had been roasting tubers over her fire when Tarnik first approached, moving with the silent grace of his kind. She had frozen, her makeshift spear gripped in trembling hands as the creature circled her camp. Then he had done something unexpected. He had dropped a dead rabbit in a log at her feet and made a chirping sound that might have been curiosity. That had been 8 months ago. Now, Tarnik was a regular fixture at her camp, along with 2 others of his kind smaller cubs she had named Scylla and Kesh. They would disappear into the forest for days at a time, then return with offerings, small game, interesting stones. Once an entire tree branch covered in edible moss. Today, Myra was attempting something ambitious. She had discovered a cache of wild grains near the riverbank and had spent 3 days grinding them into a rough flour using 2 flat stones. If she could make something resembling bread, it would be the first proper cooked meal she'd had since the crash. She was mixing the flour with water in her only remaining intact container, a dented metal bowl, when Tarnik bounded into the clearing, his gait excited and purposeful. "Hey, buddy," Myra said, not looking up from her work. She had learned that direct eye contact could be interpreted as aggression among the predators. "I'm kind of busy right now." Tarnik made his chirping sound, more insistent this time. Myra glanced up and saw that he was carrying something in his mouth, a cluster of bright red berries attached to a leafy stem. "Oh no," Myra said, recognizing the plant immediately. "Tarnik, those are—" The predator cub dropped the berries into her bowl with obvious pride. "Extremely bitter," Myra finished with a sigh. Before she could fish the berries out, Scylla emerged from the tree line, dragging something large and wriggling. It was a centipede-like creature, easily 2 feet long, with iridescent carapace plates and far too many legs. Scylla deposited it directly onto Myra's carefully organized cooking area, where it immediately began trying to escape. "Scylla, no." Myra lunged for the creature, which hissed and tried to bite her. She managed to grab it behind what she hoped was its head and toss it back into the forest. "We don't eat those. They're poisonous." Kesh, the smallest and most timid of the 3 cubs, approached cautiously. In her mouth was a single flower, a delicate, bioluminescent bloom that grew only in the deepest parts of the forest. Kesh set it down gently beside the fire pit and looked at Myra with what could only be described as hope. Myra's frustration melted slightly. "Okay, that one's actually pretty," she admitted. "But I can't cook it, sweetie." The 3 cubs sat in a semicircle around her cooking area, their amber eyes watching with rapt attention. Tarnik made another chirping sound. This one almost questioning. Myra looked at her ruined flour mixture, now contaminated with bitter berries. She looked at the enthusiastic predators who had, in their own way, been trying to help. She thought about the loneliness of 14 months alone, and how these creatures who should have seen her as prey had instead adopted her as something like pack. "All right," she said, dumping out the berry-contaminated flour and starting fresh. "New rule, if you want to help with cooking, you bring me what I show you." Deal? She held up one of the edible tubers. Tarnik sniffed it carefully, then bounded off into the forest. Scylla and Kesh followed, their movements synchronized in the way of hunting pack members. Mera returned to her work, grinding more flour and mixing a new batch. The fire crackled pleasantly, and the evening air was cool but not cold. She had just formed the dough into a rough loaf when the cubs returned. Tarnik carried 3 perfect tubers in a makeshift pouch he had fashioned from large leaves. Scylla had managed to find wild onion analogues, their pungent smell unmistakable. Kesh, practical as always, had brought dry kindling for the fire. Now that, Myra said, her voice thick with emotion she hadn't known she was feeling, is teamwork. She added the vegetables to her bread mixture, creating something closer to a savory cake. As it cooked over the fire, filling the clearing with an aroma that was almost earth-like, the 3 cubs settled around her in their customary positions. Tarnik rested his massive head on his paws, his predatory nature temporarily dormant. Scylla groomed Kesh's fur with careful licks. And Myra Dane, stranded colonist and accidental pack member, realized that survival wasn't just about food and shelter. Sometimes it was about teaching alien predators the difference between ingredients and random woodland objects. Sometimes it was about finding family in the most unexpected places. When the bread cake finally finished cooking, Myra broke it into pieces and shared it with her unusual companions. They ate together as the binary suns of Kethra 7 set behind the crystalline mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. In the grand archive of human achievement, this moment would never be recorded. But in the small firelit clearing of a forgotten world, it was everything.